and access to long-term affordable capital to empower our youth to create their own businesses and also to expand the private sector to create more jobs for Ghanaians. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned in my budget speech, recent economic data suggests that the overall tax to GDP ratio for sub-Saharan Africa in 2018 was 16.5%. The tax to GDP ratio for Ghana in 2019 was estimated to be 12.2%. Our tax to GDP ratio is lower than our peer countries in West Africa and significantly lower than many developed nations. South Africa, 26.7%, Senegal, 16.4%, Sub-Saharan average, 16.5%, and Ghana, 12.2% in 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, these statistics are a poor reflection on the country and highlight the need to change the narrative. We cannot continue to depend on such a low tax base to generate adequate revenue, service and reduce our debt, to build our infrastructure, especially roads, and to create needed jobs for our youth. The future is therefore one of sacrifice from all of us and burden sharing as a people with one language to transform our republic. Furthermore, out of about 18 million potential income taxpayers, only 2.4 million persons, approximately 8% of the total population, are registered as personal income taxpayers as of August 2021. Only 45,109 entities are registered as corporate taxpayers, while 54,364 persons are registered as self-employed taxpayers at the Ghana Revenue Authority. And there are about 17 million registered voters and about 19 million active mobile money accounts. In using the 17 million registered voters or the 19 million mobile money accounts as a proxy for Ghanaians that are of adult age and economically active, and comparing to the 2.4 million Ghanaians who pay income taxes, we are confronted with the stark reality that the structure of our economy is quite informal, unlike the Western economies, and as such, the traditional tax handles, the personal income tax, also known as payee, may not be as effective in raising the required revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, we are determined to enhance domestic revenue mobilization. The essence of our proposal on the e-levy is to widen the tax net and generate the required revenue to support entrepreneurship, youth employment, to build our infrastructure, especially roads, and reduce our debts. Permit me to emphasize that the e-levy represents our greatest opportunity to, in the medium term, broaden the tax base and meet the tax to GDP ratio of 20% as it pertains among our peers. To lessen the impact of the e-levy on consumers and subscribers, especially the more vulnerable, we shall work with all stakeholders, including the techos, to ensure that we respond to the needs of the people. We shall also ensure that administrative measures will be taken to avoid attempts at evading the e-levy taxes. The proposed e-levy is largely progressive. We have intentionally set the Ghana CD 100 threshold, covering about 40% of Momo users, mindful of the need to exempt vulnerable groups while continuing to encourage the development of our nascent digital economy. This, to a very large extent, would ensure that a significant number of Ghanaians, low-income earners in the informal sector whose daily transactions fall below the 100 CD threshold are totally exempt from the payment of the e-levy. There are other issues that have been raised by the Minority Caucus and concerned citizens, such as increasing fuel prices, poor infrastructure, and insufficient job creation. We expect this budget to tackle all of these issues. The provision of the threshold demonstrates a caring government, the actions of a government that has since 2017 implemented some of the most innovative social intervention that this nation has ever seen. As you can see from the budget, various measures have been outlined. We'll continue to remain people-centered in our transformation agenda through the e-levy and other revenue financing sources. We will be establishing the unprecedented 10 billion Youth Start program our vehicle to remove the fundamental impediment to the growth of enterprises in Ghana, access to capital. We'll also address the provision of the requisite skills for our young people to confidently start, manage, and expand their own businesses while expanding the private sector to create more jobs. Significantly overhaul the digital infrastructure on which the transactions occur. This is to increase the assurance and protection as well as security within the cyberspace. We will aggressively expand the digitization agenda to bring more convenience to Ghanaians. Efforts to improve the delivery of health by digitizing records, supporting platforms for e-pharmacy, and improving birth certificate issuance to newborns will be sustained with funding from this levy. And to expand road infrastructure, we are currently working with the Ministry of Roads and Highways to finalize all the roads to be supported by the e-levy. We expect to publish this list by end of this year. Fellow Ghanaians, putting a levy on electronic transfer is undoubtedly a new and innovative way of raising revenue for this country that leapfrogs the lack of the typical infrastructure that is required to collect taxes via traditional means. This approach capitalizes on the new digital age that we find ourselves in today and the advent of e-money and proliferation of online transactions. Most of us today are just as comfortable ordering food online or clothes from a virtual shop as we are walking into a shop or a restaurant. We need to review our approach to tax collection to reflect this new reality. But of course, with all such new cutting-edge and innovative initiatives, we do expect to encounter some challenges during the implementation stage, as we humbly request that you all bear with us as we roll out this new way of revenue collection. We'll also set up call centers to receive any complaints and all suggestions. In this consultation period, we expect to listen more to such views and ensure that the mistakes that others have made are averted in Ghana. To protect the public purse, ladies and gentlemen, we have also heard increasing concern on the need to be efficient with public expenditure. As a government, we have demonstrated full commitment to protecting the public purse and using the funds through various revenue policies judiciously. But there's more to be done. In the 2022 budget, we have committed to consolidate our efforts through the following measures. The use of the Ghana Integrated Financial Management System in initiating and processing all requests will be strictly enforced. Additionally, GIFMIS will be retooled to enable potential contractors and suppliers to verify and confirm availability of funding for awards of contracts. Only items specified in approved MDA's procurement plans posted on the PPA website can be considered for procurement contracts, and ensuring that MOUs and agreements that commit the government of Ghana financially are first and foremost approved by the Minister for Finance. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the full consequences of not passing a budget are serious. This would imply that from 1st January 2022, for government to continue work, we will need to obtain parliamentary approval to spend in advance of appropriation. Other than that, the entire government will have to shut down, which would mean, to name a few, no salaries for the almost 700,000 public sector workers, including nurses, doctors, teachers, personnel of the security services, no government services and other expenditures, including payment of contractors, uncertainties in the business environment, and pressure on the currency leading to currency depreciation. Furthermore, would have incurred devastating damage to our fiscal consolidation program, debt sustainability, and international capital markets credibility. Ladies and gentlemen, government is very committed to addressing the challenges we face as a nation and sustaining our recovery from the impact of the pandemic within our fiscal consolidation and debt sustainability. We have a very competent team managing the economy, and the prospects are bright. I believe that this budget sets us on a path of irreversible transformation, from dependence on the state to individual enterprise, from generation of job seekers to a generation of job creators, and from a place of inertia and uncertainty to enterprise, innovation, and progress for all. Let me express my deepest appreciation to Parliament for the continuous support we have received over the years. We will count on them for approval of the estimates and appropriation. We are also thankful to the Ghanaian people for their sustained interest in the process towards building our nation for today and the future. I would like to take this opportunity to send a congratulatory message to our industrious farmers and fisher folk for their tremendous contribution to the economy and development of the country. As you know, last year, the agri sector grew by 7.4%. We are truly grateful for your hard work in feeding this nation and delivering stable economy, muted inflation, and will continue to support you to achieve even greater feats. Let me also take this opportunity to congratulate the President as the Man of the Year in the Forbes magazine, continuing to show the beacon for Africa and the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention, and God bless us all. And let us move with courage, with love, with self-discipline, and the good Lord will bless us and bless our nation, Ghana. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister, thank you for the statement. Colleagues, we'll do two quick things. For the benefit of our colleagues who are broadcasting in 2 minutes, I'll do a quick summary, and then we'll take your questions. Please indulge me there. But just to sum up, the Honourable Minister has mentioned about 6 major things. Number one is that, pursuant to all the conversations that have been going on, he has formally written now to Parliament, through the Speaker of Parliament, communicating the modifications which he mentioned will be included in the budget as it was approved on Tuesday. You will notice that in that conversation there were about 5 things that had been mentioned by the minority, but this afternoon he's mentioned about 7 things, because we are consulting and engaging with a broad spectrum of stakeholders, the minority and other stakeholders. So you notice about 5 of the issues raised by the minority and about 2 things. He spells out what government's position is on all of those ones. And then for the electronic levy, he mentions the fact that the engagements will continue. He also talks about the inadequacies of our revenues generally to meet our very legitimate needs as a country, and why therefore it's important that we work to raise some more revenue using the e-levy as a very innovative tool there. He also makes the point that the most important policy proposal in this budget is this U-Start program. And it appears we all have moved away from the biggest problem which we are trying to solve, and we are all having a conversation on one revenue measure. But the biggest challenge we're facing as a country, which we've all been talking about, we saw you all running programs on it on your TVs, etc., is unemployment. And this budget spells out the most significant program to deal with it, and I think the Honourable Minister has spoken to that one. Again, the 7th item, expenditure rationalization, it wasn't part of the 5 issues that have been raised by the minority, but you notice that the 5 issues plus benchmark plus expenditure rationalization are the 7 major issues that he's speaking to this afternoon. He's spoken about what to do with it, and then he concludes by talking about the consequences of not passing the appropriations or estimates, because we move from the approval of the policy, we are now going to do estimates and appropriations, and it's important that we all rally behind the flag to achieve this. Broadcasting with Minister Acheche Nyama Beye and Somudi Kind, and the Minister to say what Trokrata for Parliament, formally. As a Kratano, the womb any and someone a Braya approval budget no. Oka say yendane any kakra or budget now or the got to protocol yes modifications. So that that Parliament approval policy no. The Speaker has said the budget is approved subject to Sa and Niamano, and said if you beka any animal no master said Sa Niamano yen tron femai. In the Minister Trokrata and the court Parliament and on watching was saying it also mean in someone.
And welcome to a promising week and to The Pulse. We're coming to you live from our studios in Kukumlimli on your digital terrestrial TV, because we're free to on DSTV channel 421 and Go TV channel 144. This afternoon, Finance Minister Ken Ofori Atta has been announcing some reliefs following agitations over the 2022 budget in the last few days. We have details of the reliefs for you on The Pulse. Also this afternoon, nationwide strike by commercial transport operators who are today protesting the high cost of petroleum products begin to bite hard as students miss examinations, appointment botched, and workers report late to work. We're live across the country as hundreds of commuters are left stranded with no means of transportation, and also monitoring a meeting between the agitated car owners and presidents this afternoon for you. Plus, Minister for Agriculture Dr. Ofori Atta tells the NPP government's achievements in agriculture, adding resources allocated to the sector in the last 5 years of this government surpassed any other government since independence. We have excerpts of a tour of the northern region. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. The Pulse is brought to you by Global Communities, Dignilu, Affordable Safe Sanitation. Remember, we're streaming live on YouTube and all our social media handles on Joy News on TV. Tweet at us with the hashtag The Pulse. My personal handle is @Denana Aisha. Please stay for details. The Finance Minister, Ken Ofori Atta, has been briefing the media. He's been speaking on the controversial e-levy, which he says government will continue to negotiate with the minority for an agreement on the way forward. He's been speaking on the unemployment situation in the country as well. My colleague Charles Nixon Yeboah with the business desk has joined me in the studio to help us understand the import of what the Finance Minister has been saying. First, Charles, let's understand where we are with this e-levy. There's been back and forth with this e-levy, especially because people want to know why this should be charged and whether the economy would collapse if it is not charged. Where are we now with the back and forth?
Well, Aisha, I'm happy that the Finance Minister clearly have said that he has modified the budget and therefore they would do more stakeholder consultations. They will engage the minority on this electronic levy. It's very important. Where we are currently, as we speak, as a country, the e-levy comes as a necessary evil because we do not have money and we need to raise money. If you look at the gap between expenditure and revenue, it's quite huge. Therefore, we need certain measures, revenue, hardcore measures, to be able to bridge that gap, and the e-levy is one of them. So I'm happy that the Finance Minister... All
right, Charles, so I'm told that the Finance Minister is answering some questions. Let's go back to the Information Ministry and listen to the Finance Minister.
A lot of things compared to the seriousness with which we are given to e-levy. And then my second question is, it's good to know that we've made the revisions and we are making progress with the budget process. But given ministers' association with the international community's experience in the capital market and how volatile and sensitive it is, should we have gotten to this level where there was a lot of acrimony with huge implications on our capital market processes and the country's image? Should we have gotten to this level? Couldn't we have handled it in a way that it wouldn't have created the anxieties created among the international community for us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what is the status of the tax exemptions bill? And then, Kwegu, are you ready? I'm coming to you. So what is the status of the tax exemptions bill, Minister? And was it possible to have foreseen what somebody's reaction could have been and prevented any sort of acrimony? There were earlier two questions. So if the budget program works in accordance with plan, what will be the projected tax to GDP ratio at the end of the fiscal year? And secondly, have the reversals of the benchmark values been included in the revenue estimates for this year? Thank you. Quickly, let me come to you quickly, and then we'll go to the...
All right, so the minister spoke about the 10 million cedis earmarked for the feasibility studies on the Blekusu Coastal project.
It says at least.
At least 10 million cedis. We know that what the minority concern has to do with the project itself. Will this 10 million be enough to do the project, or this is just going to take care of feasibility studies? And then on the score of e-levy, the minority say they want 0%. Today the Chamber of Telecoms spoke and they say they want 0.25.
No, they said 1%.
Minority leader.
Yes.
They've gone back on it as we need to understand that the leader spoke on his own. And so
who is saying this?
Sam George and then Mutaka also had a statement this weekend.
The members say the leader spoke on his own.
Yes. I
see. Go ahead.
So we also have, I have this question about the e-levy. Well, is the government amenable to a certain reduction, and will they announce that reduction? And also on the e-levy, the minority is raising concerns about some $40 million that have been allocated for some services, some collection. They are saying GRA or Bank of Ghana can do the tracking and
it's 241 million cedis. Because the budget is in cedis.
In cedis, 241 million cedis. Can the Bank of Ghana or the GRA do this? Do we need another external?
Very well.
So my question is on the electronic transaction levy as well.
What's your name,
my name is Etonam. I report for TV3
Go ahead,
and 3FM. So we've heard that the e-levy has been reviewed somehow. We spoke to the Ghana Association of Bankers and they say that bank transfers are exempt. We are also hearing that inward remittances are exempt. So this is like a normal tax. So it will be good for us to get details on whether or not inward remittances are exempt and whether bank transfers are exempt as well. We're also hearing that the majority says it's now 1.5%, not 1.75%.
The majority?
It will be good, yeah, the majority, I heard.
Who from the majority is saying this?
Apeyo Markins. He said that it's been reviewed from 1.75% to 1.5%. It will be good for us to get details on that. We're hearing stakeholders saying they're expecting 0.5%. This is a new levy. Are we not already paying communication service tax? There are concerns that it's the same thing we are having to pay again. So it will be good for you to be responsible.
Okay. So, Minister, will 10 million Ghana cedis be enough to complete the Koso project? By the way, Minister mentioned at least 10 million to commence feasibility works. And then there's a question about the e-levy, whether it's 1% or it's 0% or how we reconcile the two. And then there's a question about what is the 241 million Ghana cedis programmed in the budget as e-levy related expenditure. What is it for? Because there's a claim that it is for the services of a private company to do that. So some clarification will be helpful. Yes, Minister, we're in your hands.
Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for the questions. I think one of the first questions was the expectation really is that with this new tax measures that we have, we actually will be able to move to just around 16 to 16.5% moving towards 20. So we are really excited about that, and it just really goes to amplify the need for all of us to participate in the payment of taxes, so that the burden is shared. And that really is excitement about going digital and using the new electronic modes to do this. Yes, the benchmark issues were incorporated in the fiscals as we have them. E-levy, in terms of having alternatives, I think that's something that we need to get clear. We have this triple helix of unemployment, which is really quite debilitating if you look at the numbers. And then we have our debt, that we need to take care of to reduce our interest costs, but really to also be able to mobilize resources internally. And so we are not subject to all of these foreign exchange risks, and we can plan much better. And then all of us, of course, rail against the issue of infrastructure, especially roads, to open up our country. But the record of who is paying for this, for the 30.8 million, is quite abysmal. So the nature of the e-levy itself, gentlemen, enables all of us to be roped in and to understand the sacrifices that we have to do if we want to move to a nation with a commitment to transform ourselves and break the back of these problems that we have inherited, and just a new dawn and a new beginning to go forward. But that is not to say that the areas of inefficiencies must not be closed. And that there's a commitment to that. And so the tax exemption bill we're expecting to pass in the sitting of the 8th Parliament. The fees and charges bill also, we expect that to happen. And so all of that then goes to reduce, sort of the volatility and the uncertainty on our revenues, and we can plan and do things better with everybody contributing their quota to this. So philosophically, we also, as I mentioned, have realized the way in which the nature of commerce is going, and therefore tax handles are going to change, and we better move into that regime now and begin to understand the issues around them and perfect it as we move forward. And there's no better time than now. I think it's been unfortunate with regards to the responses and what has occurred in Parliament, increasing sort of the volatility in the marketplace and the widening of our spreads in the international capital markets. Yes, it could have been done differently. And as I mentioned today, under the instructions of the President, I sent a letter to the Speaker on the modifications that are required for us to move forward in harmony. So of the 5 areas that the minority have brought to bear, and what we have also heard in the public, we sought to address at least 4 out of the 5. And the real issue of the e-levy, to really continue with the consultation and see how we can find a way to come to redress. But as we mentioned, typically one does not reject the policy orientation of the government, but you go into consideration and committees, and that is where the appropriate changes are made. So we pray that as I sought consensus from November 26th, then successfully on November 30th, this will lead to the House sitting, the estimates being looked at, so that we will meet the December 17th deadline when Parliament is rising, to avoid the untold hardships that may occur. So it's unfortunate, but in the life of a country, all of these things are experiences that we learn, and the public then become a good judge for the politicians in terms of how to manage situations of this nature. I think the issue of Keta, Ketu South, and Anlogan is quite clear with us, and therefore the humanitarian issues will be taken care of. But there's a need really to sort of conclude a thorough feasibility study on it. In reality, we have about 540 kilometers of coastline, and between Aflao and Prampram is about 150, 149 kilometers that we have. In sitting in this chair, in this office, I have seen sea defense projects, you know, somewhere between 3 and 500 million CDs for, let's say, 5 kilometers of sea defense. And I imagine that through the 544, let's say 100, if you want to be simple about it, that then results in what? Maybe 40 or 50 billion US dollars. So there's a real need for us to also really dig deep into understanding the type of technology that we need to use to make sure that we protect the coastline. So I think there's another agency to do that and to review the cost of any such projects. But in terms of what we have to do immediately, I think that is going to be taken care of, and we are very committed to that. 241 million. 241 million for the establishment or the facilitation of the e-levy. Is that the question?
Yeah, the question is, there's a 241 million in the budget. What is it for?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. You know, typically, well, not typically, we do have an understanding of GRA, which uses approximately 3% or so of the money it raises for ensuring that they can make such collections. So truly, this 241 million, it's reserves that we intended to put aside to facilitate GRA's collection of these resources. Now it will be up to GRA to find the means in which they would ensure that with this new tax handle that they have never experienced, they will use their own resources, they will use the current common platform, engage whoever they think is appropriate to ensure that this works, because this has to work. It's our expectation that because of systems that they have already, that may not be required. In addition, typically when we have new tax measures, there's the issue of refunds, and we usually make some compensation for that, maybe sometimes 6% or so of the value, to ensure that if those refunds come, we are able to pay for them. So in essence, this really will be to back up GRA in the way in which we ensure that all of the problems that people envisage and the difficulties other countries have had, we should be ready to support that. There's no agreement with anybody at GRA or Ministry of Finance as to a service provider for this, but quite a number of local Ghanaian companies who helped us with Ghana.gov, you know, have been approached to look at this problem to ensure that we establish it, you know, a lot more firmly, and we do not lose resources in that. So we hope that GRA's platform that they have already may make this quite superfluous in the long run.
So there are two final questions. Is it true that the e-levy has actually been reviewed, and can you give any details if it's true? You've mentioned that it's a subject of further negotiation.
Yeah.
And Tetonam says she's hearing that it's been reviewed. Is it true, and if there are other details? And then finally, there was another question on reduction that you asked.
Right, so the concern is that it's now the exemptions. So inward remittance is exempted, bank transfer is exempted, so it's not a MOMO tax. So if it's a MOMO tax, you're already paying communication service tax. So your concern is that this is another tax in another shape or form.
Okay, so the question is it true that it's been reviewed, and if it has, what are the details? And then there's a claim that it is, or it amounts to double taxation because there are some other elements of tax that look like this. Quick comments on these two.
Great. I mean, I think that one of the questions that we need to face as a country is that, are we paying enough taxes? And is everybody paying taxes? So this is a fiscal measure to try and answer those issues and also ensure that we tackle the youth unemployment problem with more revenue, that we look at our debt issues and reverse where we are, and then thirdly, that we also look at our infrastructure in a way. So that is not, and then the issue of everybody participating at this juncture in our life as a nation as to how to move forward. Okay, so that really should be the fundamental issue. Will this enable us to meet these demands that we as a nation need to tackle? Now, that's a tax measure. Okay. I think the issue for us is, as I mentioned in my letter to the Speaker, the fiscal implications of the e-levy are very clear to us as to how we get these resources to do the work that I have mentioned. And so the consultations are still going on with stakeholders, widely, to find means in which we can agree, we can look at the fiscals, ensure that the 7.4% deficit is attainable, that by 2024 we are back to the FRA of 5%, etc., and that our debt levels are going down. So it's not an inconsequential decision, and we continue really with urgency to make sure that we get back to stakeholders and minority caucus, in the shortest possible time. With regards to the minority moving from 0 to 1%, etc., I can't say much about that.
So just a bit of clarity. So as it stands, the e-levy is still 1.75.
The e-levy is still 1.75. We're in serious consultations, right, keeping clear about the fiscal implications of what it will mean.
And then the coverage, so bank transfers are covered and inward remittances are covered. All that has not been reviewed.
I think, as Minister has mentioned, I'm giving you the clarity. As Minister has mentioned, it is a matter that is at large for negotiations. I think it will help those discussions and the broader public education if we don't begin taking some fixed positions on it. The Minister has mentioned that it's a 1.75. We've heard things in the public domain about 0.5, 1%, etc. But let them finish their conversations on it, and then we can have some definite matters. The last batch of questions, at this time I'll expand to about 6, and then we'll wrap up. I want to take a quick hold on, because I've heard from you earlier. Let me take those who haven't spoken, and if I have an excess, I'll come to you. There are 2 at the back who haven't spoken. Then there's a call here, 3, 4, 5. That's fine, that right? 5. Is there a 6th? Else I'll go to Kweku and give him the 6th. Kweku, so I'll give you the last word as a 6th. So let's start from this end, and let's be snappy, please.
Good afternoon, Minister. My name is Joshua from BNOT. So given the, going back to the e-levy, how long do you think it's going to take for it to be passed in terms of the acceptance, given the restraints from the minority and also other stakeholders in terms of the consensus building on this particular topic, on the e-levy? How long do you think it's going to take, given that appropriation bill is supposed to be passed before the end of the year?
So, Minister, are you hopeful that the conversations on the e-levy will be concluded before appropriations is passed?
My question has to do with the e-levy. They are concerned that...
You don't like you start, you like e-levy. No, go ahead, I'm just kidding.
So they are concerned that government agencies and things like that, government agencies which use Momo as a means of payment would also fall within the tax. And that would essentially be government tax in itself. So would there be exemptions made for these payments?
Payment for government services?
No, government agencies, let's say leave and those kind of things.
Those are government services.
Would government tax itself
Yeah. So will payment for government services be included in this? Yes, sir. And then there were final 4 here. Let's start with Echo. Echo. Let's get the microphone to Echo, please. So are you optimistic that the conversation on e-levy will be concluded before appropriation is passed? Will e-levy apply to government services or payment for government services? Yes, Echo.
Thank you. Minister, we noticed that for the first time in the budget presentation, you mentioned a deficit figure that includes legacy debts. Does it mean that moving forward we're going to have a one deficit figure? And why that decision? Because it was not so in the past. And on the paragraphs you altered in your modifications, Ejapa and Eka, we don't have the benefits of the contract, the agreements yet. Can you give us pointers what exactly has changed in those graphs?
And please let's take the second question again.
In the modification, you mentioned that you altered a graph or so in the Ejapa.
Paragraph.
No.
A paragraph in the Ejapa and then the Eka deal. I'm saying that we don't have the benefit of that document here. So if you could point us to what exactly that means.
No, it was quite clear. It says it will be amended to take out the reference to mineral royalties collateralization. It's clear here.
So it's a sentence that it is going to take out?
Yes. Okay, so that is the discomfort of those who have raised it. So that will be taken out.
Thank you.
And then on the other matter as well, we've always talked about deficits if you include energy sector, etc., and if you exclude them. So it's not the first time.
No, usually when the government presents the statement, the budget statement, we have that usually in the footnotes. Yeah. But for fiscal years, the government really will present, for example, this year we are looking at 9.4.
And so your question is, are we going to get to a point where it will no longer be in the footnote?
Where the recorded figure of deficit is encapsulated almost automatically.
Yes, so there's nothing to report in the footnotes.
No, you're asking, so what is the thinking that went into that different trajectory that we are embarking upon? And maybe finally I ask, you want Ghanaians to sacrifice, we are sacrificing. Today there was a strike by transport unions asking for reductions. So the average Ghanaian is really already sacrificing. Can we really bear this? Are you not killing this same goose that you deserve that will lay the golden eggs? Thanks.
And then I'll take a final two. The gentleman and then...
Yeah, my name is Emmanuel. I'm with GH1 TV. The e-levy is earmarked among other things to do with infrastructure, unemployment, and then 10 billion Ghana cedis use that. Of the 1.75%, I would like to ask, how much of that amount goes into use that? And then secondly, Minister respectfully mentioned expenditure rationalization. I like to think of it in reducing our expenditure estimates. So the question is, are we going to delay some government spending until 2023 or 2024, or we are looking at reducing the estimate in its entirety? Thank you very much.
Kingsley, Ghanaian Times. My question is on the road toll. The road toll form part of government revenue mobilization or projection for 2021. Now that it has been abrogated, how much is it going to affect our revenue projection for 2021?
2022.
No, I mean 2021.
He means the 2 months. He means in the last 6 weeks of the year, how much are we going to impact is it, and whether or not it's significant. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So, final one on the conversations around the strike today by transport workers. They said they want 5 taxes removed from the price buildup. The government met them prior to the presentation of the budget and said it will be captured in the budget, whereas nothing was mentioned of it in the budget. What exactly is going
to be captured in the budget?
According to the transport ministry, when they met the transport unions. And then on the second question about the...
This is apart from the 0 rating of the 2 out of the 5 taxes you made.
Right. See, they said they want 5 taxes removed.
Yes, and 2 of them have been 0 rated. Yeah. So you are saying that apart from that, they're asking, can they hear about the other 3? That's the question.
Yeah. Okay. And then on government services, the fees and charges going up by 15%, and then subject to annual inflation review. There's those who have said that is also killer, and I didn't see the government doing anything about that particular aspect of the budget. Thank you.
But the fees and charges bill hasn't even gone to Parliament. Okay. And I guess part of what Minister is saying in his earlier statements that there are things that, apart from the policy, you now come with the specific measures, during which period you can have the specific conversations about those ones. Minister, when you ask the final budget.
Right. Thank you very much indeed for this. I think Joshua talked about the consensus building, and that's really sort of an important attribute of our society, and that's our sociology. And we have done that successfully since 2017. So it's quite unsettling where we are today. But, you know, given that we've been able to accommodate 4 out of the 5 and actually done a bit more on other issues, I'm confident that we should be able to come to a consensus and be able to have the House rise at the right time on December 17th. So that's my prayer to the good nature of ourselves. And what we've gone through these 10 days, I guess, would enable all of us to calm down and see the greater good of the country. E-levy, government services, really government services will look, in terms of government taxing itself, that would be exempted from that. Mr. Minister of State, that's correct, is that right? Government services will not be taxed on itself. So that's that. Then I raised, you know, some fundamental issues that Minister of Information has answered. But I think for the narrative and the conversation, we are not, as a country, an island. And I suppose when you read, you would know the issue of global supply chains and its effect globally, and therefore its impact on inflation. You would know the issue of fuel and OPEC stance, and America even having to release its reserves, and all of that. And then you know our import content as a people with regards to importation of about $2 billion worth of food and flowers and toothpicks and all of that stuff. And then you know who pays taxes and who doesn't pay taxes. So those are questions that we ask ourselves as to what type of austerity do we need to be able to break through this colossus of debt, of unemployment, and of infrastructure. And what is it the nation has to do at this point in time to be able to get through? I think if you look at the past 2 years and the type of, the extent to which government went to make sure the lives and livelihoods were saved, and if you look at social interventions since 2017 with regards to senior high school, with regards to national health, with regards to the LEAP program, with regards to free water and whatever, you can't pretend that nothing has happened. I think we've done the most roads also in the period than any other government. So we need to confront that and say, how do we now all participate in this burden sharing to go forward? Because we can do it. And the charge now is we are at this junction. We are a people of great resolve. We are the Black Star. What is it that we have to do? Lock hands together, circle the wagons, and say that we'll break this helix. And that's a conversation that we should be having around. If you look at the youth, and whose child should not be working? And what is the indignity of staying at home? And what is the cost to that person? So an intervention of 10 billion cedis, which is historic, never been done before, you know, with that type of impact that senior high school is also having. You know, it's going to change the way in which dynamism, innovation, self-confidence will come to our country. And we want those legs to be moving. So 0.25% of the levy is almost equivalent to 1 billion cedis, which we have committed to do the next 3 years to make sure that the issue of access to capital, training, and technology are available for people to be entrepreneurs as we build an entrepreneur nation. But even if not everyone can be an entrepreneur, private sector with more resources will expand to be able to absorb more people. And that really, I think for me, the Youth Start program is what gets our common humanity in place, and to think for the reason, for the sacrifices that we have to do to move to the next level of middle or high income country. And that's just the reality of facing the world that we are in, and we as a people saying there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And let us go for high achievement so that we can really break through this perennial problem. So that's how I look at it, and the old talk about, breaking the golden egg and all of it. Very, very emotive, but truly to get social mobility, there has to be a way in which we found a way to educate people, which some other parties said was impossible, and we did that in the same way in which we are bringing this 10 billion intervention to make it possible to see a different world for our people. And so the Youth Start program is a game changer for the country in terms of an sustainable entrepreneurial nation. And that's where we should go as a people. So very excited about that, looking forward, to an engaged society that would really herald this new beginning that we are talking about. Mr. Minister, I'm not sure what the road toll program.
Would there have a significant effect?
I think it was about maybe 74 million CDs for the whole year. So
6 weeks.
My old arithmetic will bring it. Yeah. So that's what. But really, in terms of the question will become the opportunity cost, and we are talking about $7 billion CDs for e-levy. And so you begin to sometimes ask the question, why would somebody ask about a 7 million CD problem when we have this gargantuan issue of moving the nation ahead and with that? And the issue of the road tolls, I think there were some things which really were quite pernicious. The issue of pollution and just the hassle of sitting in a trotro, sweating, and being in traffic for that long. I mean, that's not the way to get to work, So for us, I think eliminating that and looking then into the future for these PPPs, which are then real highways, to then toll them, we think will be of more impact and effect than what we have there. So that will be the reason, and that really is the cost to us. Mr. Minister, were there some others?
Yeah, there was a final question on does expenditure rationalization mean that some things are going to be cut or things are going to be deferred?
Yeah. I think we laid out some of the issues in terms of intense application of expenditure commitments and the value for money issues, and how we have to make sure that the pricing of government services, appropriate projects that are brought to us are looked at, and then times for finishing projects, etc., and that you don't bring third-party projects to ministries, and if it's not on the government's platform, it just can't happen. So you, the contractor, should beware that when you go and somebody gives you a contract, check on the website whether it is actually part of anything at all. because it just wouldn't have the resources for that. I think that will bring some sanity to that, and looking at things like sea defense and reevaluating, what type of pricing should occur with projects like that would also be looked at.
Mr. Final words. Go ahead.
Beg your pardon? Wow.
There's a 4 p.m. meeting today.
Yeah, I think there's a meeting later this afternoon, so I guess I'll be briefed on that, on exactly, what the impact is and what it means, and the conversations about world prices and what the build-up, etc., to see what we can do. Yeah. Yeah, so this really, and thank you very much for coming and listening to us, but it was really an attempt to let the nation know that it's been a difficult 10 days since we went to Parliament to read the budget, and a number of concerns have been raised by the public and the minority. We have, as I mentioned, sent a letter to the Speaker for modifications for about 80% of what they had sought, and what other stakeholders had also brought in. The issue of e-levy, I believe, really hinges on the fiscals and exactly what impact any changes will have on that. But I think we'll come close to a resolution by talking to stakeholders and ourselves and determining which direction that we can go. But we also assert that in the considerations and in the committees, these things can be resolved. But we will, as soon as possible, be able to come to Parliament with an agreement, I believe, so that December 7th, 17th, Parliament can rise. But I think one thing we should not lose sight of, and Minister mentioned it, is really this intervention on the Youth Start program. The whole issue, if you look at each district or if you look at each constituency, and you see our youth not employed, and to come up with this historic intervention that we all should look to support and raise with the same enthusiasm in which we did for senior high school. It's a real game changer. Let's see it as that. Let's be the children of Issachar to be able to read the times that we are in and understand the issue of sacrifice, the issue of burden sharing, the issue of all of us paying these taxes, so that the back of debt, the back of unemployment, and the back of infrastructure will be broken. And I'm sure we, the good people of Ghana, the Black Star, will be able to do that. So I am excited about the future. I'm confident that we can get to a consensus that will meet everybody's needs, and Parliament will be able to do its work. Thank you very much indeed.
Honourable Minister, grateful colleagues, thank you for your time, and we look forward to you informing the country that the Minister has written to Parliament, communicating the modifications and the details of those. Thank you very much.
You heard the Finance Minister, Ofori Atta, briefing the media on some of the issues that have been raised since the 2020 budget was read and approved, and the issues that people want to be addressed, including the e-levy and also the company that will be brought in to collect the levy or to manage this e-levy. He's been talking about the fact that we are paying too much interest on our loans as a country. And the question remains, why are we there, or why is it so? He's also been talking about amending paragraph 442 and 443 to take out the Japat royalties. Remember, that has also been controversial. CSOs have been calling on government to make sure it doesn't come back. A minority in Parliament has also been warning that they do not want it back. So the minister says something will be done about it so that it doesn't go back. He's been talking about the GDP ratio of 12.2%, which he says is lower than our peers. And of course, what are our peers? What's the situation elsewhere is something we'll be talking about. And he's been talking about the intervention of the Youth Start program, which he says is a game changer. Charles Nixon, before we went there, you were talking about the state of the economy and trying to explain to us whether we really need this e-levy to make our economy work.
Well, I've always said from the beginning that we have issues, and the issue has to do with our fiscals and financing. If you've been tracking government treasury bill sales, bonds, you could tell that we are really struggling, and we need to take an action, and the action e-levy is one of them. But for me, the question is, was there any broader consultations? That is where we should ask ourselves.
That has been established. There was no consultation.
Exactly. So
because if you
that is where
if you listen to some of the economists
exactly.
and all the stakeholders, I mean, on this in this area, then you realize that there was no consultation.
So it means there is a fundamental problem, because I felt that there could have been a broader stakeholder consultation that would have, addressed these brouhaha, that I'll call it. For instance, if you listen to the Institute of Economic Affairs, ISE and Co., they are proposing 1 percentage point rate, which relatively it is better. And the issue about discrimination, because we know that the e-levy will primarily be it's Momo that primarily is going to be affected by the e-levy. There are other electronic transactions that will not be affected. But my issue is, if you look at the number of Ghanaians who undertake Momo, clearly majority are in the middle and lower bracket. Fine, the government argues that 30% are rather in that bracket. They have to prove it. You need to prove it and show that these are the numbers, because for us researchers, we believe that before you make a decision, you must back it with quantitative and qualitative, result, and that would make your case stand out. Okay. And that is where the challenge is.
Interestingly, the finance minister hasn't still announced any resolve to this issue. He says they will still continue to engage the minority in parliament to come to a consensus.
That is brilliant.
Of course, but that's not what Ghanaians want to hear. Ghanaians want a finality to this issue, the back and forth of the e-levy. But there's also this interesting point that he raised about we paying too much interest on our loans. But why is it so?
That is an interesting point, because I have always been arguing that if you look at the amount of monies we've borrowed or the loans we've contracted over a period of about 4.5 years, it beats my imagination. Because if let's say you are a company and you borrow too much, it will get to a time the bank that you would be going for a facility from will deny you of the facility, because on your balance sheet, you could tell that your current liabilities are so much that it's very difficult for you to be able to take care of the repayments. And that is where there is a problem. For me, the challenge in the economy has to do with fiscals and finances. So how do we address the challenges? On the revenue side, there had been a lot of research or thesis that we have cited some. There are a lot of loopholes in the system. For instance, the tax exemption bill must be passed, because about 5 billion cedis is lost to tax exemption. And that is huge. That money can take care of some expenditure. You get the point I'm making. There is also the issue about transfer pricing and declaring of invoicing. These are matters that must be addressed, must be looked at holistically. So, for instance, the finance minister talked about an agency that will be established to help with the collection of the e-levy.
Exactly.
But
that has been...
my argument again is that the revenue assurance and compliance enforcement unit established at the ministry to help mobilize revenue.
What has happened to it?
Exactly. So a lot of market watchers, analysts will say that it's just on paper. We are not seeing actualization. So that is where the point is. So we are not doing much in terms of revenue. 12.5% of tax to GDP is relatively low. We are lower middle income. We should be doing 19 to 20%.
Okay.
So the loopholes in the system must be closed. We must find innovative ways of raising revenue. Secondly, the issue about expenditure. So you talk about interest payment, the question you asked. We have not been prudent with expenditure. And I was happy the chairman of the finance committee, proud to the budget, raised this issue. We need to close the wastage in the system. And that must start from the central government.
Definitely. If we need to
exactly.
see our way
and
forward.
These are very critical points. So if you have all these brilliant projects like the You Start, the Ghana Cares of Batampa project and what have you, where is the money or the funding to finance these projects? If you are not making money. Because if you look at the fiscal gap or the financing gap, it is very huge. The IMF fiscal monitor will tell you it's about 14.5%. The government will say no. Other organizations like Fitch, Moody's would also peg it at a higher rate, about 12, 13%. So it tells you that there is a major problem. And I'm happy the central bank had consistently spoken about that. So drastic action is necessary. That is why, for me, I'm for the e-levy, but the rate must be reduced. And we must also look at pushing it to cover other payment platforms and not necessarily mobile money. So if the rate comes to 1% or below 1%, that will be good because we need money.
Well, that's
one way of getting money is through the electronic transaction.
That's something we are looking forward to seeing, as the minister promises us that it's going to continue negotiation with the minority to reach consensus. Charles Nixon Yeboah is editor with Joy Business. Also this afternoon, some drivers in Ashaman and Kaswa remain on strike despite the calling of their leaders to call off the strike. And also we know there's a meeting this afternoon at the presidency to meet their leaders to find a solution to this problem. We'll bring you details of all of that shortly on the Pulse.